It all started with a knock on my office door. I looked up from my desk expecting a coworker, but instead a sheriff's deputy stepped in and handed me a manila envelope. "You've been subpoenaed," he said flatly, before turning and walking out. My chest tightened instantly. I ripped the envelope open right there. Inside were words that would shatter my life. Petition for dissolution of marriage. For a second, I could not breathe. My hands started shaking as I flipped through the pages, trying to make sense of it all. Then I saw the kicker, a restraining order. I was being banned from my own house, the house I bought before I even met Brienne. It said I could not go within 100 yards of the property, and I could not even call her. Brienne, my wife of 4 years, claimed she feared for her safety. Safety? I could not wrap my head around it. The night before, we had been together twice, and now this. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The tightness in my chest grew, and for a moment, I thought I was having a heart attack. But no, I was not that lucky. Instead, I grabbed my keys, left work early, and drove aimlessly, trying to process what was happening. I ended up at my mom's place, standing on her porch like a lost kid, holding nothing but the clothes I was wearing. "What happened?" she asked. I could barely get the words out. "Brienne's divorcing me," I said. That was all I could manage before breaking down. She hugged me, took me inside, and gave me my old room back. Just like that, I was 33 years old, living with my mom again and completely blindsided. The next morning, I tried to call Brienne just once to hear her voice, to demand an explanation, but as soon as the line connected, I hung up. I knew it would only make things worse. She had already told the judge she felt unsafe, and now I was terrified that a single misstep would have me in even deeper trouble. The woman I loved, my best friend, had turned me into a stranger, an enemy. That whole week felt like a nightmare I could not wake up from. My bank account was frozen, my personal life was being dissected by lawyers, and I was sleeping in my childhood bed. And still, the only thing running through my mind was, why? What did I do wrong? I got my answer 3 weeks later, but it was not what I expected. Sitting in my childhood bedroom, staring at walls covered in posters from a life I left behind years ago, I realized I could not stay. Every corner of my mom's house felt like a reminder of how far I had fallen. I used to have a wife, a home, and a future I thought was certain. Now, all I had were the clothes I wore to work that day and a mess of emotions I could not even begin to untangle. I quit my job the next morning. I could not think straight, let alone focus on numbers and meetings. My boss tried to talk me out of it, but I was done. I just need time, I told him. Time to figure out what the hell my life had turned into. I packed what little I had left into my Mustang, a couple of shirts, my motorcycle helmet, and some cash my mom pressed into my hand. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Anywhere but here," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. My plan, or lack of one, was simple. Drive west, avoid highways, stay off the internet, no maps, no GPS. Just keep moving until I ran out of gas or found somewhere I could exist without feeling like a failure. The first few days were a blur. I stuck to back roads, passing through small towns I would never remember the names of. I slept in the car most nights, parked in rest stops or empty lots. By the 4th day, I hit a breaking point. I had been living on gas station snacks and caffeine, and my body was screaming for real food. That was how I ended up in a dive bar somewhere in the middle of nowhere. A handwritten sign in the window caught my eye. "Help wanted." I walked in, ordered a beer, and asked the bartender about the job. "Hard work, minimum wage, you get lunch and dinner, and tips if you're lucky," he said, eyeing me like I might be trouble. "Deal," I replied. "I just need a place to park my car." He shrugged. "You can park out back, but don't cause any problems." That was it. I was hired on the spot and handed an apron. My first task, cleaning tables covered in dried ketchup and beer stains. It was not glamorous, but it gave me something to do besides feeling sorry for myself. For 2 weeks, I worked like hell during the day and crashed in my car at night. The bartender, who also owned the place, paid me in cash, handed me an envelope on my last day, and said, "You ever need work, you know where to find me." I drove away the next morning, not feeling any closer to figuring it out, but at least I had survived another couple of weeks. This became my new routine. Find work, stay for a bit, then move on. Each town was just another stop in this aimless journey of trying to outrun the wreckage of my old life. Winter hit me harder than I expected. I had been bouncing between small towns, picking up odd jobs and moving on without much thought, but the Rocky Mountains in December are no joke. The snow came down so thick I could barely see the road. The heater in my car was on its last legs, and every mile felt like I was pushing my luck. By the time I stumbled into some nameless town in Colorado, I was out of options. It was late, dark, and freezing. The only lights I saw were coming from the police station. I parked out front and went inside. A deputy at the desk looked up, probably wondering what kind of idiot was out driving in that storm. "I just need a place to park," I said. "I'll stay in my car until the road's clear." He shook his head, half laughing, and said, "You'll freeze out there. Park in our lot. There's a diner across the street. Grab something warm to eat." That diner changed everything. The owner, Mrs. Volano, was an older Italian woman with an accent thick enough to make you feel like you were in the middle of Little Italy. She looked me up and down as I walked in, probably wondering why I looked so desperate. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and scarfed it down like I hadn't eaten in days, which wasn't far from the truth. As I was finishing, she came over and said, "You staying out there in that car? No good. There's a cot in the storeroom. It's warm. You can stay tonight." I was too tired to argue or feel embarrassed. I thanked her, moved my stuff inside, and fell asleep the second I hit that cot. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of something incredible: fresh bread, garlic, and herbs. She was already in the kitchen, cooking like it was her life's mission. I offered to help, and when she saw I was serious, she let me chop vegetables. Over breakfast, I noticed a stack of old paint cans in the corner. "What's with all the paint?" I asked. She sighed. "My late husband bought those years ago, never used them. I should throw them out." I offered to paint the place in exchange for food and shelter. She laughed, said I was crazy, and then agreed. Over the next few weeks, I scrubbed and painted every inch of that diner. But the work was not just about covering walls. It gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. In the afternoons, I helped in the kitchen, learning how to make dishes I could barely pronounce. She taught me the secrets of real Italian cooking: how to make pasta from scratch, how to balance flavors, and how to sing while you stir, because according to her, music makes the food taste better. It was not just cooking, it was therapy. I stayed there for 18 months, longer than I had stayed anywhere since my life fell apart. We planted an herb garden in the spring, made wine in the fall, and every day I learned something new. Not just about food, but about myself. By the time I left, I was a different person. Mrs. Volano handed me a cookbook she had written out by hand and said, "This is for you. And when you get to San Francisco, look up my cousin Tony. Tell him you're the son I never had." I packed up my car and drove off, unsure of what I would find in California, but knowing I was no longer the same man who had walked into that diner on a freezing winter night. When I pulled up to Tony's restaurant in San Francisco, I was not sure what to expect. It was a narrow building squeezed between two other Italian joints, and the smell of garlic, basil, and something incredible I could not place hit me the second I opened the car door. This was the place Mrs. Volano had told me about, the next chapter of whatever I was doing with my life. The front door was locked, so I knocked. A short, bald man in a chef's coat cracked it open, his face suspicious. "We're not open yet," he barked. "I'm here for Tony," I said, holding up the envelope from Mrs. Volano. His expression shifted. "Wait here." A minute later, another man appeared. Tony, I assumed. He was bigger than the first guy, with slicked back hair and a voice that seemed to fill the entire street. He opened the envelope, read the letter inside, and laughed. "So, you're the guy who can cook, huh? My crazy cousin says I should let you into my kitchen like you're some kind of legend." I did not respond. I just stood there waiting. He glanced at the cardboard box I was holding and asked, "What's that?" "Gifts from Mrs. Volano," I said, opening it to reveal 4 bottles of her homemade wine. He raised an eyebrow, grabbed one, and poured himself a glass right there. After one sip, his eyes lit up. "All right, kid, let's see if you're worth all this talk tonight. The kitchen's yours." That night, I went all in. I made cioppino, a traditional Italian seafood soup with fresh crab, scallops, and clams. I whipped up linguine tossed with olive oil and crab and gnocchi with basil pesto from scratch. I could feel the staff watching me, testing me, waiting for me to fail. But I didn't. The Sciopino sold out in less than an hour. Customers were fighting over the last portion of gnocchi. The linguine disappeared as soon as it hit the tables. By the end of the night, Tony came into the kitchen, threw arm around me and said, "All right, legend, you've earned your spot." Not everyone was thrilled. Gina, one of Tony's daughters, watched the whole thing with this skeptical look, like she was waiting for me to mess up. When I sent some food to the office for her to try, she barely acknowledged it. Still, I could feel the tide turning. The kitchen staff started calling me the legend, half as a joke, half because of what I had pulled off that night. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Tony offered me a permanent spot in the kitchen, and I took it. This was not just a job, it was a chance to rebuild. I had to prove to myself and maybe to everyone else that I was not done yet. When my sister called to tell me she was getting married, I was happy for her, genuinely. But then she dropped the other shoe. "You have to come to the wedding." I hesitated. It had been over 5 years since I had stepped foot in Chicago. I had avoided family events and reunions, all to steer clear of one person, Brienne. My sister knew it. "She'll be there," she said, her tone soft but firm. "She's the groom's cousin. I get it if you don't want to come, but you promised, Dad." That hit hard. Our father had made me promise on his deathbed to walk my sister down the aisle if he couldn't, and now I had to make good on it. After weeks of her wearing me down, I finally caved. A month before the wedding, I joked about not having a date to bring. That was when Gina and Marie, the twin daughters of my boss, Tony, offered to come along. "We'll be your dates," Gina said, half smirking. "It'll be fun." "Both of you?" I asked. Marie shrugged. "You can't pick between us, so why not?" And that was how I ended up walking into my sister's wedding with 2 stunning Italian women on each arm. As the limousine pulled up to the church, I could see the groomsmen and bridesmaids milling around outside. They were probably wondering if I would even show up. Then the car door opened and the 3 of us stepped out. The reaction was everything I needed. Cameras flashed, heads turned. Gina and Marie looked like they had stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine, wearing perfectly tailored dresses with thigh-high slits and lace stockings. They each looped an arm through mine, and we made our way toward the entrance. Inside, I saw her. Brienne. She was sitting next to her mother, looking like she had aged a decade. The years had not been kind, and neither had life, judging by the confused and somewhat shocked expression on her face as she saw me. I could feel her eyes on me, but I did not let it faze me. After walking my sister down the aisle, I mingled with family and friends. Gina and Marie stayed close, playing their roles perfectly, even going as far as to help me charm a few relatives who were still skeptical about my sudden reappearance. The highlight came during the reception. My sister asked me to make a toast. Public speaking had never been my thing, but I stood up, grabbed the microphone, and addressed the room. I talked about family, love, and promises kept. At one point, I turned to the groom's grandparents, who had flown in from Italy. They did not speak a word of English, but I toasted them in flawless Italian, a skill I owed entirely to Mrs. Volano. The room erupted in applause. Brienne, on the other hand, looked like she was trying to disappear into her chair. I caught her mother giving me a look that was almost apologetic, but I ignored it. As the night went on, Gina and Marie stole the show again, dragging me onto the dance floor. At one point, the band handed us the microphones, and the three of us serenaded the newlyweds with love songs. It was ridiculous, over the top, and completely unforgettable. Toward the end of the night, Brienne's mother approached me. "Peter," she began, her voice hesitant, she wants to talk to you." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to say. Please, she's sorry. She wants to apologize." I reached into my wallet and pulled out the letter Brienne had given me all those years ago, the one that explained her betrayal in cold, detached words. I handed it to her mother and said, "Give this back to her. It's hers, not mine." Then I turned around, found Gina and Marie, and walked out of that room without looking back. As I left the wedding with Gina and Marie, the cool Chicago air hit my face, grounding me after the whirlwind of emotions inside. We got into the limousine, and as soon as the door closed, Marie leaned her head on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah, for the first time in a long time, I actually think I am." The ride back to the hotel was quiet, but it was a good kind of quiet. Gina and Marie, who were usually teasing or bickering with each other, stayed silent, almost as if they knew I needed the space to process. I looked out the window, watching the city lights blur together, and felt something I hadn't in years: closure. The next morning, I woke up early, packed my bags, and headed to the airport. Gina and Marie were staying behind for a couple of days to visit friends, so I had some time alone to reflect. Sitting in the terminal, sipping a coffee, I thought about the wedding, Brienne, and the years I had spent carrying the weight of what she did to me. For so long, I had let her betrayal define me, but last night, seeing her, seeing how small and bitter she looked compared to the life I had rebuilt, it was like a switch flipped in my head. It wasn't anger or pity I felt, it was freedom. Back in San Francisco, things returned to their usual rhythm. The restaurant was as busy as ever, and Tony greeted me with a booming laugh when I walked into the kitchen. "How was the big family reunion?" he asked, wagging his eyebrows. "Let's just say I'm glad to be back," I replied, tying my apron and getting to work. Life didn't change overnight. I still had moments when the past crept up on me, whispering doubts and regrets, but those moments became fewer and farther between. The restaurant was my sanctuary, and the kitchen was where I felt most alive. One evening, after the rush had died down, I was cleaning up when Gina came in holding a plate of tiramisu. "You haven't eaten all day," she said, setting it down in front of me. "Thanks," I said, grabbing a fork. She sat across from me, watching as I took the first bite. "So what's next for you?" I paused, considering her question. "I don't know," I admitted. But for the first time in a long time, that doesn't scare me." She smiled. "Good, because wherever you're headed, I think you'll be just fine." And she was right. The road that brought me here had been messy, painful, and unpredictable, but it had also shaped me into someone I never thought I could be: stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. As I finished the tiramisu, I thought about the journey ahead, not as something to escape to, but as something to look forward to. For the first time in years, I was not running from my past. I was walking toward my future.